Okay, so please note, as this is a public meeting, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the City of Beaverton's website. Minutes are still being taken as well. Please make sure you are muted unless you are the active speaker. Attendees are automatically muted. For any quick comments, you can hold your spacebar to unmute and release the spacebar to become muted again. Please be aware of items in your video background which may be offensive or distracting to others. You can select virtual background in the drop-down list next to the video icon. For our attendees, you can type your questions in the question and answer chat. All questions will be addressed during the public comment time on the schedule. If you would prefer, you can also click the raise hand button to ask your question directly, and we will make sure to come around to you as soon as we are able to. For attendees who are joining by phone, you can raise your hand by typing *9. And if we have multiple people wanting to speak, the order of who will be speaking will be put in the chat box. You are welcome to have open discussion in the chat function at the bottom of your screen, but please be aware that chat becomes public record. I will be monitoring the chat, so feel free to let me know if you have any technical difficulties and I can troubleshoot with you.
Thank you very much. So we are called to order. So for today's agenda, we will approve the July minutes. We will have our public comment period. Councillor Hassan will give us an update. We'll have a little chat about street cleaning, which is going to be very interesting for those of us who are concerned about the state of our bike lanes. Michael will dig into the Why We Ride initiative. We will do some kickoff activities for Bike Beaverton. Then we will open discussion and brainstorming about the City Council annual report, which is a work in progress. Finally, we'll have our City of Beaverton updates, member comments, and hopefully adjourn by 8:30. Jean, would you please lead us through scrolling through the July minutes for those who haven't had a chance to read them already? All right, very good. Do we have any motions to approve our meeting minutes?
I see Ananda's raising his hand.
Thank you. And any seconds?
John Vogler raises his hand.
That was John. Yep, John with a second. All those who are in favor of approving the meeting minutes, please raise your hand. All right, any opposed? I don't think I'm seeing any scrolling through. Any abstentions? All right, one abstention. So with that, we have approved our meeting minutes from last month. That brings us to the public comment period. I don't see anyone on the attendees end, but just in case, anything during public comment? All right, if anybody comes late and we have time at the end, we can always loop back and make sure folks get a say. So if Councillor Hassan is ready, we can roll right into our council liaison updates.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. It feels like it's been a while because I missed y'all last month. So hope you're doing well. So a couple updates. We've got Jenny Haruyama, who's our new city manager, starting August 23rd. Yay. We're really excited about that. We've got a council meeting coming up on August 24th. There were two big potential topics. I don't know that anything has changed, but as of now, the last I knew, we're going to talk about ARPA funding. If you're not familiar with ARPA funding, it's the American Relief Plan Act money. Cities and municipalities across the United States receive specific funding related to COVID-19 relief or support. And so the city council is going to discuss what we potentially do with that money. There's a lot of holes that we need to fill in budget, but there will also potentially be an option to talk about what that looks like. The second part of what I understand of the August 24th meeting is the discussion of the Human Rights Advisory Commission recommendations, where we were asked to visit some concepts around what reform and police oversight looks like here in Beaverton. I'll drop the links in a couple minutes in the chat. We did get a really great presentation from our housing team on the Housing Options Project. If you're not familiar with this, middle housing is a big push right now with what does it look like to build housing for our communities. We're in a housing shortage. If you didn't know that, if you tried buying a house recently, good luck. And so we are being asked to really start thinking about what kind of housing do we want to build in the limited spots that we have. And so I will drop the link to that so that y'all can see the presentation. And I believe there's also a survey. So if you have input on what housing options you'd like to see in Beaverton, there is a sort of friction between supply and demand. And so how do we build enough with the limited space we have, but then also how do we stay a welcoming city and allow people of different income levels and diverse backgrounds have access to purchasing or to living in the city. And then last but not least, this might not pertain, but I have it in my notes. We have been talking about updating our shelter code. We had a emergency severe weather shelter that was operating from the Beaverton Community Center that was really kind of a temporary model given COVID. And so it was a place where we allowed folks that needed sort of a night to sleep in. And so we're looking at updating that code to potentially see what it would look like to have something like this here in the city limits. I'll take any questions if you have them. And in the meantime, I'm going to look for these links so I can drop them in the chat for you.
Any questions?
You're the best. No questions.
I wanted to add, I was sitting in on that joint session on the Housing Options Project, and I think it's very exciting work that I think a lot of members of this committee would find interest in, because for me, land use and transportation, are kind of the same thing. So I'd highly recommend, going back and watching the presentation and keeping an eye on where things go from there.
How utilized have the night options been? Having spent the last year and a half in Clatsop County, I don't know if there's been an uptick in homeless in Beaverton.
I could speak a little. I mean, there's definitely a need for support. Some of it's in Beaverton, some of it is in unincorporated parts. So I know there's like an encampment in specific areas. So there is a need. And our current severe weather shelter, which was really focused, when I say severe, it was severe winter weather shelter. as I've gone by the library, I've seen folks that have kind of known that area. So there has been that issue. To Michael's comment, what to make it more like explicit, like there is conversation around like bike friendliness, like nature areas, right? And again, we've got this like demand issue, which is we want everything, and then we've got the supply issue. So how do we build in like a transportation friendly, pedestrian friendly kind of way?
For those not watching their chat, Councillor Hassan has put a link in there that you can check out. Meanwhile, any other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any, so that means we can hypothetically move on. Jean, I don't think I see in our participants list.
Jesse, right. Jesse hasn't shown up yet. So let's ask Steve if he wants to start, or do you want to wait for Jesse to get here?
Jesse,
Because we're way ahead.
joining us.
Okay, perfect. It's all yours then.
All right, and we're going to turn it over to Steve Curtis, who is going to teach us. He's from Public Works Operations Division, and he's going to teach us about the city's street cleaning program and priorities, and we'll have a chance to ask some questions. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, so yeah, my name's Steve Curtis. I'm with the Stormwater and Wastewater Department at the City of Beaverton. Jesse Wilson is, I believe, volunteering for his son's baseball team right now. I'm not sure. He's doing double duty between baseball and football this time of year, so he's a little preoccupied. So street sweeping is one of a couple different groups that we oversee, and I think probably the most visible to the public as far as just a clear and transparent result that they provide. If at any point you guys have questions, feel free to chime in. Obviously at the end we'll have time as well. So yeah, starting off with kind of why, hold on. I told a couple people at the start, I'm trying to juggle a couple different screens right now because I'm remoted into my desktop at work and I'm on a cell phone from my house, or on a laptop from my house. So I apologize for any delay. First off, why do we sweep? The biggest reason is to improve downstream stormwater quality. The goal of the sweepers are to remove debris before it gets into the catch basins. This is trash, pine needles, sometimes car parts, sanding rock. I think the bike community knows a lot about what ends up in the gutters of the city. It also helps prevent localized flooding. Obviously, we deal with that more in the fall than anything. Excuse me. Public safety. Obviously, this is a big one for bikers and drivers. Reduce or remove road hazards that could impact drivers, cyclists, or pedestrians. I think standing rock's going to be the biggest one. A lot of times we'll get calls out for like roofing nails or stuff like that that winds up in the road. I've been a victim to that, and I think that's a common hazard. And I think lastly is the aesthetic side of it. No one likes a dirty street. So on average, we pick up between 600 to 800 yards of sweeper debris every year. That's not including the leaf season. In the fall, we'll collect over 3,000 yards of leaves, and that's just from the sweeper program and the leaf drop-offs that the city provides. If the material does make it into the storm drains and makes its way downstream, it becomes much more expensive to remove, both equipment-wise and labor-wise. So street sweeping is one of our big priorities, and it's kind of the first line of defense for our stormwater program. So where do we sweep? All the improved streets within Beaverton are swept at least once a month. There's an intergovernmental agreement we have for Northwest Beaverton. The section up north of Jenkins in the Waterhouse area is done by Clean Water Services. And in exchange, we sweep some of the southwest, the Garden Home area for them, even though it's not technically incorporated Beaverton. That equates to roughly 430 miles of curb line. Downtown and arterial sections are swept more frequently. The downtown's about twice a month, and then the arterials, we use that as kind of a filler for our early starts. We're not allowed into neighborhoods until 7 a.m. And so we sweep the bigger arterials, Murray, Hall, Allen, those kind of collector roads more frequently as well. There's 15 unique grids, and each grid is designed to take 1 to 2 days. Generally, the schedule is the A row is done in the first full week of the month, B row second week, C, et cetera, et cetera. The numbers themselves within those rows unfortunately don't really correspond directly to the day of the week. We have 2 full-time operators, and they kind of split the grid up. So one will start in A2 on a Monday, the second one will start in A4 on a Monday, and they work their way through that way. So right now we have 3 sweepers. They're referred to as Regenerative Air Sweepers. It's a closed system. It helps reduce the amount of dust that's kicked up while we're sweeping. We have 2 Timcos. These are just the brand of the sweeper. It's like Ford versus Chevy. 2 Timcos and 1 Elgin. Average speed that they're moving at is 4 to 6 miles an hour. They say that's the optimum sweeping speed. As far as efficiency goes, you're running the most efficient at that point. You're not going too fast where you're just blowing over stuff before it can get picked up, and you're not crawling around and wasting fuel. So you can kind of see in the diagram, the regenerative air sweepers, they'll pull in. Let's see if I can. Be able to do that. So on the diagram, number 2, that's the intake tube that pulls the debris up into the debris body, which is highlighted by the number 3. 4 is really for dust separation. The air just circles through that chamber. And then number 1 is basically a giant fan, and that's what accelerates the air into the down tube, and then it blows across the street and into the up tube again. So it does a good job of collecting fine debris. It does much better with pine needles than like a traditional sweeper would, the full broom sweeper that you would see. Just as a reference point, these hold about 5.5 yards of debris, and each yard weighs about 1,000 pounds. So it definitely, the weight on these things adds up pretty quick. I feel like every time I go to change the slide, I'm juggling between different screens. So seasonality, obviously in Beaverton, we have usually pretty mild weather, but leaf season is by far our biggest commitment every year. At that point, we have all 3 sweepers running. Normally in the other 9 months of the year, we only have 2 sweepers that are running full time. But in the leaf season, we have all 3 running 7 days a week from mid-October through mid-December. And you can see the obvious spike in the hours from 229 in September up to a high of 512 in November. So the leaves are just the hardest thing for us to deal with, because if we were to stick to our 1 month timeline, the city's just buried. And so we try and increase our intervals. And to do that, we need to be running 7 days a week, and we have extra staff coming in as well as running additional equipment. We call it a leaf vac. And so it's essentially just a giant vacuum that we tow behind a big box truck and blow the leaves into the back of the truck. You can see a small spike in April. That was, I think that lined up with when we were really having to clean up all the standing rock after the winter storm that we had. One thing that is frustrating on our end of things, we have 6 vehicles that can spread standing rock, and they drive about 25 to 30 to 40 miles an hour sometimes. And so they can put down rock much, much faster than we could ever pick it up. And so what they put down in a night can take us 3 weeks to pick up. And as soon as the snow's gone, we're getting calls immediately that the rock should be picked up. And so I always try and communicate that we're doing as much as we can. We'll have 3 sweepers out at that time. And we're making improvements on it, utilizing GPS on the trucks to try and make that cleanup a little bit smoother, but it's still just super labor intensive, and it takes much more time to pick up the standing rock than it does to put it down.
Looks like we have a question from Corey.
Go ahead.
I did have a question, but I lowered my hand to wait for the end. I'm sorry. My question is that I think there's a website or number to call for reporting road hazards, but one thing that you didn't mention that I'm keenly aware of as a cyclist is glass, and if you had any recommendations on how to manage that hazard on the roadway.
So we get calls from BPD, the police department, pretty frequently. If there's a crash that has produced debris, whether it's glass or I've seen a bumper that gets knocked off and left in the bike lane, we'll get a call for that. But as far as like the smaller, if it's just someone cracking windows to try and steal a stereo, we don't always get calls for that. So the bigger collisions we do get notified of, and there's like 2 slides down, there's a link to the report a problem page, as well as contacts for myself and the other relevant employees in my department. So when you do see that, I fully encourage you to reach out, let us know about it, because sometimes, depending on the timing of it, it could be there for a month before we get to it, and that is unfortunate for everyone involved. So by all means, reach out when you see something, and we'll jump on it as soon as we can.
Great, thank you.
So looking ahead, as Beaverton continues to be with the new development and the infill development that we're seeing and the redevelopment, there's obviously a push, and you guys were talking about it before, there's a push for low and middle income housing. And a lot of times, just by the nature of it and what people are expecting, they want smaller spaces, not smaller spaces. but they want more walkable and bikeable space with kind of a less reliance on automobiles. And that ends up being tighter lanes. If you look at the apartment complex right next to the Beaverton building, there's really narrow pullouts. They have curbside water quality facilities now, and all of these mean tighter quarters for the sweepers. And with the ones we have now, it's difficult to make the turns that you need to sweep the entire roadway. So with that, we've been looking at smaller sweepers. This is a picture of a fully electric sweeper that we demoed a couple weeks ago. There's a big push, both externally and internally, to get away from the the traditional diesel sweepers. The sweepers we have right now, they are using about 4.2 gallons of diesel every hour. And so that equates to a lot of emissions. Switching over to a full electric, they're much more expensive, but it could cut our emissions significantly. Even just by switching one or two of the sweepers over, it's 100 pounds of CO2 every hour, essentially. And then when you extrapolate that over the shift and throughout the year, it adds up very quickly. Beyond just the EV or the plug-in hybrids, there's multiple companies that are offering smaller street sweepers. If like with the Western Ave CIP project, there's going to be separated bike lanes. I believe I need to double check on the as-builds for that, but
yeah,
stuff like that's going to present a challenge for us because our standard sweepers aren't going to be able to fit very easily, and to get in and out of those sections is going to be difficult. And so to find an efficient way that we can get in and out of those lanes is going to be very helpful, and I think necessary as we continue down this path. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Multiple pages. I'm stumbling over my feet at this point. So Corey, this goes to what you were asking about, the sweeping requests and hazard reporting. There's the Beaverton Report a Problem page, and if you scroll down, it will provide a link for a report. You can input your contact information, where the problem is, what it is, and that gets fed to our admin staff, and then they'll forward that on to me. If you want a more direct line of communication, my desk line's attached, and then my email's provided on the City Beaverton street sweeping page. It's buried deep in there, but if you Google Beaverton street sweeping, it's the first result. And I like I said, I encourage anyone to reach out if you are seeing hazards, or if there's just something that you think needs to be addressed. Feel free to reach out. And that's the end of my presentation. So are there any other questions? And then I myself had a question. I'm curious if there's anything that this group thinks that we as the city, and specifically the street sweeping stormwater department, can do to encourage or make bike as transportation more approachable to the public.
I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a way for us to know when this street sweeper will be coming to our street so that we can take our cars somewhere else and keep it free?
So we, unfortunately, because of staffing and a variety of other variables, we can't provide a day-to-day forecast. The week of is generally the best we can do. And a lot of times you'll notice that the sweeper is coming on the same day of the week, but I don't like promising that, because then someone goes through the trouble of moving the cars and doing what we would like to see. But if the sweeper doesn't show up that day, then I get an upset call asking why the sweeper wasn't there. And so it reduces friction on my end if we just try and keep it to the front half or the back half of the week.
But you might have seen in Bethany, the cars are lined up the entire two sides of the street. So how do you manage there?
Sorry, can you say that again?
In Bethany, the cars are parked on the road on the both sides of the road, and hardly there is any space for a single car to go. So how do you manage there?
So we've got a couple streets in Beaverton that have no parking signs posted for like the first Thursday of the month.
Oh,
I think you called out Bethany Boulevard.
correct.
So that's outside of city limits. Clean Water Services would do that. But for streets in city limits that we deal with, there's a handful of them that if it weren't for the no parking signs, we would never touch the curb. And we try to limit how much we use that, because a lot of times it disproportionately affects lower income neighborhoods. And I just don't like being punitive like that. I feel like it's an unnecessary burden. There are sections that we're working on right now to, like, maybe on a quarterly basis, where we would go through and put barricades up just for a specific, like 3 hours of one day, just so that we can get in occasionally and get the curb. But yes, there are certain streets where we're kind of hoping that the cars just aren't completely blocking the gutter.
Yeah.
There's only so much we can do.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just want to say that I've had success with the reported problem in the past. There's a property owner that likes to sweep all his yard debris right where a bike lane starts in a high stress area. And I've reached out a couple times to get it cleaned out, and it's usually the next day. So thank you very much for taking care of that.
I'm happy to hear that it's recognized.
So Mike Mulligan, who couldn't join us this evening, had 2 questions that he included in an email to myself and Jean. I believe that one of Mike's questions was answered, but for this recording, in case Mike checks it out later, Mike was asking about if street cleaning services are informed of locations where car crash happens so they can go to clean up. And as we heard, you are informed by law enforcement, and you encourage people to report in anything that they spot. Does that summarize the answer accurately?
Yeah, and if, I mean, we have 140 people, I think, at operations right now. And so a lot of the requests we get are from our staff that notice something as they're driving around. I mean, we've got people driving around the city all day long. And so a lot of times we'll get an internal request from another group that just noticed something as they were going to or from a job site. And so we get a lot of requests that way, but definitely if you see something, feel free to contact us the first time you see it. If you wait a couple days before you say something, then that's just that many more people that are dealing with it. And so I encourage people to reach out when they do identify a problem.
And then Mike's other question, which I think you touched on, but I'm not 100% sure if it was sufficiently answered. He was wondering about the coordination of cleaning different county roads in Beaverton, and he gives examples, 170th or Cornell. And I guess it's just kind of an overall question about how are different streets coordinated. I know you've got those different weeks of the month sectors. I guess how does coordination play into places that are on your grid versus places that are done by that other company?
So we handle pretty much every street that's inside of the green areas. There's sections of Murray. I think it's Terman is where it loops off right by just on the north side of the Max line. Clean Water Services takes over at that point, but everything south of that will sweep. Shoals Ferry between 135th and 217. The south side of that is done by Tigard, and then the south side of Barrows is done by Tigard as well. So that's kind of a weird bottleneck. I'll get calls about that pretty frequently. But other than that, we sweep most, I guess the state does, the state and ODOT do 217 and sections of Canyon and Beaverton Hillsdale. But even that, if it's a call out, we won't respond on 217. But if it's an overpass or if it's on Canyon or Beaverton Hillsdale Highway, we're happy to respond to that. And it can be frustrating, but the easiest way for the public to get that dealt with is to pass it on to myself or another agency. And personally, I try to handle that stuff internally instead of just pushing a resident around and playing whack-a-mole, because that's just incredibly frustrating. And I think I can resolve it quicker than a resident can.
And then you asked for feedback. So for me, I think one of the more frustrating things I deal with on my rides is going down Millican, and sometimes of the year, you just get tons and tons of pine needles that build up in the bike lanes, and it's nighttime when you're riding. And that can always be a little scary because you have no idea what the pine needles are hiding on the ground on the side of the road. But otherwise, thanks to you and the whole team for keeping our streets clean as best you can. We wouldn't be able to ride at all if we didn't have any pavement to help us out.
We're happy to help. And there's been times where I'm a fair weather commuter. I'm not going to pretend that I ride year round. I like sun and like 60 to 80 degrees. So it restricts my window a little bit. But there's times where I'll see something on my commute that I'm sure has been there for a week, 2 weeks. And I am just in a position where I can say that the next time then they're in the area to make sure that they get it. And so it's not, I keep saying this, but we don't always know about it unless someone tells us. And so if you're seeing a hazard and it's still there after a day or two, we probably don't know about it. So please reach out.
I'll just say real quick, folks, I'm going to put the link to the report a problem page in the chat. So you can just grab it and stick it in your browser while we have the meeting going. But it reaches more than just public works. There's a full menu of all sorts of problems you could report to us. So feel free to use it.
Are there any more questions for Steve? We've got plenty of time.
Yeah, I had a question. First off, thanks for the presentation. Learned a lot in there that I didn't know before, and I wanted to echo what Michael said in terms of public works timeliness with a lot of these issues. My question is, you mentioned the EV street sweepers, the either electric or plug-in hybrids, and you said that you demoed some. Are there any immediate plans to purchase any for the fleet, or are they more still in the discovery phase of these vehicles?
So City of Eugene is taking delivery of a full EV this fall. I think it should be there in September. The one we demoed, it just didn't quite, the battery was insufficient for what we needed for it at this stage. They're talking about upgrading the battery already. The one we demoed was, I think, a 160 or 180 kilowatt hour battery, and they're rolling out now with a 210 or 220. The one we had, it couldn't even make it half of a shift, which is a huge problem for us. We don't want to have to cut our days short to run back to the facility to charge it. So we delayed taking it to council for this year. And I think Nadia might know a little bit about this, I'm not sure. But we're not considering it for this coming fiscal year, for this coming budget, but it will likely be on the table for the 2022 or 2023, the next, a full year out. And we'll bring it back up at that point, depending on how realistically, depending on how Eugene likes theirs. I feel it's a pretty good comparison. And so if they're happy with theirs, we'll be looking at this very seriously. Did that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
And then Annie, I think, was that
Yeah.
you that was?
A couple of questions or comments. One is that I noticed that there are often some busy intersections where it just seems like there's always the same pile of rubble there. I mean, I'm sure it changes, but it seems to always be in certain busy intersections. And my other comment, I guess, is kind of maybe pie in the sky, but I somewhere along the line I saw footage, probably in Denmark, of people on bicycles with sweepers, on the front and pushing the debris along the roadways. And obviously with the the tonnage of what you're picking up in these huge devices, it doesn't seem practical. But I wonder if in any way, shape, or form that's something that could be envisioned maybe on smaller street spaces. And in particular, like I'm thinking about the number of people I see, making a living off of canning, and they're on bikes and they're carrying huge sacks of things, and that maybe there's a way to provide employment for individuals by creative budgeting and funding to have people on bikes actually sweeping with bicycles. If the trucks are moving 4 to 6 miles an hour, bicycle, I guess, it would have to be a totally different arrangement on, what could be picked up where. But if there's any way of, doing something innovative like that.
Yeah, I've seen, I think City of Portland had something on their page about there was a local inventor who kind of fabbed this room head that he pulled behind his bike that was intended to kind of push leaves out of the bike lane, and it wasn't by any means meant to pick debris up. It was just purely trying to plow a path through the bike lane. As far as expanding our staffing levels like that, I think it'd be very hard to set up that infrastructure that we would need for that if we were to be picking up debris at that level. And that, yeah, for the material that we're doing, I think that'd be hard for us to envision, but anything's possible. So if there's a way to make it happen and a push to make it happen, then we're flexible. We can adapt if need be.
Are there any other questions? We still have time. I'm not seeing or hearing any, so if that is indeed it, then thank you so much for coming by today, Steve, and just teaching us so much and taking our questions.
I'm happy to come by, and I'm appreciative for the floor. Thanks for listening, and hopefully I provided some new information. But like I said, the biggest thing to take away from this is to feel free to reach out if you see a road hazard. If you see something in the way, don't hesitate to contact myself or operations, and we'll address it as soon as we can.
All right, then next on the agenda, I will turn it over to Michael Dunleavy, who will talk to us about the Why We Ride initiative.
All right, to start it off, I'm going to share the initial slideshow that I created when this was first proposed. So just a moment, because this takes up all my bandwidth. Okay. So the point of it was to raise our encouragement score. We scored pretty lowly on that, and I thought that something that we would be able to improve without having to get a whole lot of buy-in from the community or the city, and not to spend a whole lot of money or time to do so. Originally, I was thinking it could be featured on the website, social media, or the newsletter. And the plan was to create profiles for various types of bicyclists, trying to showcase diversity and asking a lot of questions. Here was a sample profile that I created about myself when I was only 34 years old, because this happened a couple years ago. And then I highlighted a few more potential questions and discussed the role of the entire committee in this initiative. However, I feel that the idea of profiles may be kind of a little overreaching at this point. I'm admittedly a bit behind on the zeitgeist of social media, and it seems now that privacy and brevity are more important. And also it's shifted more from being wordy to photos. At least that's the understanding I have. I have admittedly removed all social media, and it's been great for my own headspace, but I could be completely off in what my understanding of it is now. So if anyone disagrees, feel free to say otherwise. So I guess my amended rationale is that we just have pictures and name, and rather than a lengthy profile, just saying, answering the question, why we ride, and focusing on that makes it a lot easier for one to interview people. There's not a whole lot of commitment. It's just a matter of taking a picture and getting an answer to a question. And to be honest, people probably aren't as likely to read a lengthy profile of an individual compared to just a few words, just a quick blurb. So in terms of amending, I think that we should start with Bicycle Advisory Committee members, since the ability to go out into the public is a little hindered now. Like when it was first proposed, the idea was to talk to people at Bike Beaverton, and that was done a little bit the first time. I was getting my feet wet, and admittedly was not as successful as I'd hoped in profiling it. And I think it was because trying to get a lengthy profile for individuals was more difficult. Whereas if you're just saying, hey, you know, answer this question, what's your name? Let me take a picture. It can go a lot easier. So shifting the focus to that, I think it's easier to get profiles to share. And I think if everyone's willing to submit one, we could start with committee members and then stagger them every couple weeks just to get it going. And I think once the ball is rolling, and we have something concrete that we can point to people saying, hey, this is what it would be used for, they might be a bit more open to the idea, because I certainly got some, not necessarily pushback, but hesitancy saying like, well, what is this? What do you mean? Like, so I guess I'd like to, you know, ask everyone to just submit something that can be used for it. We have the go ahead from the city to share it on the social media channels. And I think that's the easiest concrete way to then show for our next submission to the League of American Bicyclists, like, hey, we have encouragement here, you know, look to this, look at how littered our city's social media channels are with these profiles. So if anyone has any thoughts or feedback, I'd like to hear it.
So do you have any fixed format we can use? For example, I bike with the Northwest blind athletes, and with the blind athletes, we can do only tandem biking. We cannot do the regular biking. So the tandem biking, we need more space to make a turn. So can I give you the feedback in any regular format you have? Like what we need for tandem biking with the blind?
Sorry, could you repeat the last part of it?
Yeah, so I tandem bike with the blind people. I take them on my tandem bike. So there's something called the Northwest Blind Athletes. So I'm part of their organization. And what we find is very few cities support the full tandem biking. Not all cities there, because the roads are narrow or there is no bike path. And with the blind people, there's a lot more restriction. So if I want to submit a report or whatever you are asking for, do you have any fixed format? I can just go click and then put all my information there.
That can certainly be created, yes.
Okay.
Just using like SurveyMonkey or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah. Nothing's been created yet since I admittedly put this on hold during the pandemic. So
Okay.
I can get something drafted up, absolutely, to make it easy to submit that kind of thing, because
Yes.
absolutely be a great vehicle for profiles. If you have people that are actively riding with you,
Yes.
yeah, they'd be great subjects for that. So I'll look into if SurveyMonkey or something else would be a good way to create a submission form. If anyone has ideas better than SurveyMonkey, please let me know.
If this is being coordinated through city government, it's possible that if there's a designated city email that's associated with it, that account user could do like a Microsoft Forms. I believe Forms is part of the Microsoft 365 for Business Suite. So, I mean, it's an option. Meanwhile, I see your hand is raised, Jean, sorry.
No, that's okay. So I wanted to chime in, and Michael, I haven't had a chance to connect with you. So it was great to see the slides that you have from when this was all initially conceived. So I have met with Jemai Cherry, who's in our events team. Michael, he was who did the videography, I believe, at the last Bike Beaverton in 2019, when there were some interviews done from people who were at Bike Beaverton. So my initial ask to him was really to find out what happened with the videos. I hear there's videos. What can you tell me? And we talked kind of more about this whole initiative overall. And I think it'd be good for us to talk a little bit more about, I think, how this can be used to help promote Bike Beaverton. We're going to kind of slide a little bit into our next agenda item. And so first, let me tell you about the footage that Jemai says he has. He has 3 very specific interviews that he has. One was with a large family, and he said it was a bilingual interview. The second was a family that had recently moved here, and so they were talking about their experiencing biking in Beaverton. And the third was a mother with 2 children, and her story was that she was not a choice rider, so she was riding a bike because that was her transportation. And her story was sort of along the lines of she was getting more comfortable with riding, and she talked about the things that would make her more comfortable with riding. And Jemai was saying that probably of those interviews, there's probably 30 seconds to a minute of, like, you know, by the time you edit and get sort of the best of the content. So that, you know, that's the sort of the what he has from that those Bike Beaverton interviews. Jemai is on our marketing team, so he is our direct connection to the city's you know, website, social media accounts, and all of that. So there's a piece there, particularly related to Bike Beaverton and promoting that, that is directly related to his role. For the city, he was sort of explaining, you know, what's the citywide initiative? And at this point, our citywide initiative that we have related to this is really about marketing Bike Beaverton. So I kind of want to put that idea to all of you, because I love the profiles idea, and I think, Ananda, having you and one of the blind cyclists that you bike with would be a great profile, because that's just, who knew that, right? No one will expect that. We won't have you on video. We'll figure that out. But it can be, if you remember, for those of you who are here, when we were talking about moving Bike Beaverton from September to May, is that we're also bringing it forward in the year to be part of Bike Month. So there's definite interest from our marketing team to, like, promote Bike Beaverton, promote Bike Month, and this could be the sort of the marketing piece that helps us do that. So that's, you know, that's what I wanted to share with you on that. The one other thing that you all kind of a separate but related piece that you all could help with is that we have had a hashtag that we've used in the past that's been dormant for a little bit, called Transportation Tuesday. So the hashtag Transportation Tuesday, and various topics around transportation will populate our account on that day. So if there's content, for those of you who are social media savvy and understand how hashtags work, if there's content that you see out there that you think would be good for the city to promote, Jemai and I would love to get it, because we want to bring back Transportation Tuesday, you know, to our social media. So that's sort of a separate aside thing that Jemai and I talked about. But just looking back at kind of my notes from my conversation with him, those were his thoughts, and how he thought we could take the Why We Ride, bring it forward into Bike Beaverton and Bike Month. And then he and I talked about him coming to one of your meetings later this fall, as we kind of start to look ahead to Bike Beaverton. So I'll stop there, and then, you know, questions for me or questions for Michael, or thoughts and responses. So.
Does anyone have any input on how to promote it on social media. I'm under the impression that it's most picture and brief words, maybe a couple hashtags is how it's used these days. So trying to be with the times rather than, a lengthy monologue and profile with questions that no one's going to read, I think is a better approach than what was originally proposed.
I see Amy has her hand up.
Yeah, I thought I could just chime in here. First of all, I think that this is an awesome idea to put on the city account on Instagram or something like that. If it was just a picture of someone, we could also use resources like Canva or something like that, just to put like a main quote from the interview kind of off to the side of the picture. That way, when people are kind of scrolling through, it grabs their attention as opposed to just to like a picture of a random person. And then in the caption, there could just be more information from the interview. I think that might be helpful. I also just looked up the hashtag why we ride, and so we could also include that somehow. Right now, there's not that many bike photos on it. It's mostly motorcycles, but there is a couple. So yeah.
Is it people in Sturgis right now?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird hashtag. It's mostly like Harley Davidsons, but yeah. That's just kind of my input.
I mentioned the first time that I presented this, that the idea from it was taken from a snowboard film that some people I knew made, but the original term was from Why We Fight, which was some World War II propaganda films. So hopefully it doesn't evoke too much memories of that. I had to dig to find that out. So hopefully it's not common knowledge.
I saw Annie's hand up first and then John's.
Yes, I was wondering how we can use platforms like nextdoor.com to reach out to different neighborhoods in Beaverton to get a variety of input based on neighborhood and why people ride in certain areas and maybe not in others, that it could be informative. But I guess how nextdoor.com works is you have to be within a certain grouping to post. So I don't know if anyone has a way of like reaching out to all the neighborhoods, or I guess there's sometimes posts from city officials that can go out to all the networks. So do you know if that could be done?
Yeah, Annie, I was just going to chime in, and Nextdoor is a tool that helps neighbors connect, but we also have our neighborhood association committees that are formally recognized by the city, and I think that they're probably a better avenue for doing outreach to ask people if they're interested in participating in a campaign. They're volunteers just like you. They're just working on the neighborhood side of things. So I'll make a note of that. These are all really good ideas, and I think these are all ideas that we can talk more with Jemai when he comes to join us and think through kind of all the details of how do we find people and how much more can we add to this. So I'm going to make a note of that, Annie. Thanks.
John, you were next in the queue.
This idea has been kicking around for a long time and it's never really gotten any traction. And I know because I was interviewed when I was writing for Portland years ago, they had a Why We Ride program as well, and nothing ever came of that. So I appreciate the enthusiasm. Like it seems like everybody thinks this is a great idea and we ought to move it forward. But I think we have a responsibility to ask ourselves what we're trying to accomplish and why this hasn't worked so far. What's the point, and could our resources be better applied in some other area? So I know I threw out a lot there, but I guess I would just ask, what's the point here with this campaign?
Boiled it down to improving the encouragement score for the lab to move Beaverton from silver to gold. How meaningful that is certainly debatable. And knowing that there are other areas that can be improved on the lab score, I just see this as something that we as a group are able to do without having to go through bureaucracy, which I think is unique on the lab scorecard.
Yep, exactly what Michael said. You know, dialing it back, the difference between silver and gold level for our score, you know, there are a lot of different categories. Some of those we can't do anything about, things on the government or law enforcement end, but there are some things that we can try to affect, and that encouragement score is one of them. And Michael's idea can help us just start to bring in the public and the citizenship and get the discussion started about biking in Beaverton. And as Jean recently said, this program could also serve as a way to drum up enthusiasm and interest in Bike Beaverton, which of course Bike Beaverton also helps with our encouragement score in getting people involved.
Yeah, I want to chime in too. You know, I think it's a great idea that this is something that we could focus on in terms of what is actually within our power, because it can be sort of difficult to try to wield other mechanisms to affect these scores. I will say this has not been helped at all by COVID, because I think a lot of the original intent was like, oh, we go to all these events and this is where we talk to people and find people. And obviously those have been sidelined for a year and some change. So hopefully, you know, cases will improve, or we can figure out how to do this virtually. But COVID has not been helpful to this endeavor.
An idea for maybe how we could start doing this virtually and maybe use it kind of as a beta test situation. If we could, Michael, if you don't mind just coming up with a short list of maybe questions that might have value for the bigger Why We Ride initiative. And then Jean, if you can send those questions with maybe a request for photos of us with our bikes to us on the committee and the committee adjacent people, we can see what sort of answers are given. You'll have some profiles to start out with, and we can see if maybe certain questions are better than others for when we move forward with the wide release of this program. Just an idea.
And
I can definitely help with that. So.
Build off of what Michael said, COVID certainly hurt. And then right after all of the interviews at the previous Bike Beaverton, I had a son born and have admittedly not been as attentive to this. And moving out to the coast for the last year and a half too, I do feel like I've been kind of disconnected, but we are moving back in a couple of weeks here, and I'm excited to re-engage with the community of Beaverton again. I've felt disconnected, but this will be sort of my way of becoming involved once more.
We are still running ahead of schedule, so if there's more discussion or questions that anyone has, we've got time. Yep, Amy?
I do just have a comment that kind of circles back to what we were talking about before, but I do think that it would be a lot easier if we could create like some sort of form, like a Google form would just be very simple, even with the members here, and everyone could write their own responses and also upload a photo that would go in with that submission. That way it's just all in one spot. And also, I'm not familiar with other forms, but I do know Google form can be easily converted into Google Sheets, which would be helpful for if we were sending it to the marketing department and we could put in like on this date at this time, we want it up on the Instagram or something like that. And that would be helpful there, but yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know about. I never heard of Google Form. Is it through Google Drive?
Yeah, it's linked to all your Google accounts. So
Okay.
as long as you have a Gmail, you can use it.
John, I see your hand.
So if the purpose of doing something is to raise our encouragement score to move from silver to gold, I don't think I really understand what the encouragement score, what the scope of that is. It might be worth for this group to relook at that criteria, and maybe there are some things that are better strategies towards improving our encouragement score. I hate to be a naysayer, but it just seems like we've got kind of a failed idea that we keep like, let's just try harder and keep plugging away. If we are trying to do something to increase our encouragement score, maybe this is not the road to go down. Instead of trying to think of ways to do videos and go in this direction, there might be a better way to approach this. So I guess I would ask that maybe at the next meeting we could have somebody that knows about the encouragement score review that, and what are the elements maybe that other cities have used to improve their encouragement score, and let's just take a fresh look at this before we plow more resources into it. That's my point.
Jean, could you please resend the lab application and feedback materials to the BAC? That way we have time to dig in and read up about that. And then if it's in our agenda next month, we can go in with
For sure. Yeah,
Every
for sure.
2 years, right?
4. Thank
4,
goodness
oh.
it's not every 2. We'd always be working on an application. Yeah, I was just, well, let me find it. I was just looking at the application, at the materials. So I have, not that long ago, I went into the LAB website and downloaded information just to kind of see what's changed, because they do update the process. And I will forward to you the most recent application so you can take a look at it. And it describes, there's the whole encouragement section. So there's all the categories. And it's mostly like check boxes. And what's interesting is actually in this most recent application, as I'm looking at it, they recognize how many communities had to cancel events. That's like the first thing that's highlighted. So it's really, it's a series of questions about how we promote Bike Month in our community, and how we promote cycling outside of Bike Month, and then any events specifically marketed to any particular groups. And they've called out a whole bunch of different groups, and then how does the municipality sponsor events? Those are some of the ones. What youth programs do you have? Those sorts of things. So there's a number of questions that need to get answered. So the how we promote during Bike Month and outside, I think that's where sort of a campaign like this starts to fall in. And I can pull up the last application so we can sort of compare and see how many more boxes we can check. I will tell you, just coming from my perspective, I have not spent really any time looking through this. We will be due to renew next calendar year, I believe. I will say I don't think there's much that's new that we can check off the list from last time. Granted, I've only been at the city of Beaverton 2 years, but just from my perspective, I haven't seen an explosion of bike stuff happening in multiple categories. So I think the key thing is to make sure we stay silver and continue to make progress towards gold. I think, John, you asked a really good question and had a really good comment about, like, what are all the categories that need to be, that are included in the scoring itself. And I think Michael pointed out there's some that are related to sort of larger city initiatives that aren't things that necessarily you all have sort of the ability to contribute towards, but others, like this campaign idea, are things that you can contribute towards. So let's just put it, we'll talk more about this at our next meeting, and I'll send the last application and sort of the current version to all of you so you can spend some time looking at it and thinking about it. But I do think, though, having new content to help promote Bike Beaverton and promote Bike Month would be great. And I know Jemai would be really excited to work on that with all of you. I kind of wrote down a hashtag of why we bike Beaverton. Might be a way to get Sturgis out of the hashtag and have it be unique to us. So play with that, because you know, why we ride, that's, you know, it's a whole mishmash. It's good to go check out a hashtag. So thank you, Amy, for investigating what's in the hashtag today. That's a key thing. So.
As much as I love this discussion, we do have our next topic that started hypothetically a minute ago that I'd like to switch over to, which is, of course, talking about kickoff activities for Bike Beaverton. And Jean will be leading us in that discussion.
Okay, thanks. So I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Shannon, who leads our events team. And I said, it's really early to plan Bike Beaverton, but I said, I know the BAC is eager to start thinking about it. And really, like any event, and I liken this, if you are someone who has gotten married, you can't really do anything until you plan a date. So that's really our key thing tonight, is to debate 2 possible dates in May. And then I can share with all of you just some of the other. We didn't talk very much in depth at all, but we talked about just a couple of things. And I would like to just sort of think of this as our kickoff, and find out kind of, I know in the past this has been an activity that's been one of your primary volunteer activities in the course of the whole year. So maybe we can think about roles that people might like to take on, and kind of just get you all thinking about that now. And we don't even have to commit to anything tonight. So we have 2 possible dates in May when we look out at the calendar, which are Sunday, May 15th and Sunday, May 22nd. So that avoids Mother's Day and Memorial Day. So we have 2 Sundays to choose from. And this is your chance to say, oh, but that's this other thing or something. But we have the floor for those 2 dates. Thoughts? We can't predict the rain, but, you know. Anybody have a strong preference for one or the other?
I think my overall opinion is whichever day the majority of us can make it to. And I know we are missing committee members tonight, so we can have initial discussion tonight and then always move it to email if we need to, so the city of Beaverton can get a timely suggestion.
I think that's a good idea too. Anybody have any college student graduating? That's the only other thing that happens in that month. I can always send an email to everyone and just ask folks to reply, you know, one or the other or both, what works for you. If here's a chance to look far out in the future. Okay. We also talked briefly about the routes, and I think we all feel pretty strongly just to keep the same routes as before. Really, since we're moving from September to May, we thought that was about the biggest change we would want to do with the event, is moving the date. I know you all, you know, and I also have shared, I think there's a fondness for the routes we have. I think you all know them, for those of you that participated in the past. They're good routes. There's 3 routes, right, that are based on distance. So, you know, easy, medium, hard, short, medium, long, whichever it is. So we thought we'll keep the same routes. We have also had sponsors or partners, and really those are the folks that show up and we say, come be a part of our event and bring stuff and have a booth. And we have information in the past from when that was done. So if you remember in 2019, Kyung Park was part of our events team. He did a great job. Kyung is no longer at the city, but he left a wonderful organized folder of information for us. So we have a list of all of those folks who were there with us last time. We have plenty of room in that parking lot, I think, to expand. So for those of you who don't know, right, our event staging area is in the library lot, the same lot as Farmers Market on Saturdays. So we'll pull those lists out. We're happy to add to that list for potential sponsors and partners. And I had a sense from before, and this is my question for all of you, that you all may have had some help in helping to find those sponsors, or maybe Kyung had done all of those communications. Someone remember one way or the other how that went? Or maybe a mix of both?
I definitely remember that the city of Beaverton was doing a lot of the outreach based on which corporations had provided sponsorship in years prior, but my memory is not 100% on this.
That's okay. Okay. I mean, I think it's an appropriate role for the city to go do that outreach. But I wasn't sure if there were some that had come directly from you all, that because you had connections elsewhere in the community. So I'll say this: if anyone has an idea for a business, a bicycle business, some other business, some other kind of provider that's related to cycling, to make a note and send that idea. And if you have contact info, send it my way, and we'll be sure to do that outreach to folks. What else? The only other thing I had on my list was just kind of thinking about volunteer and volunteer roles. How you guys have done that in the past is new to me because it was before I was your staff liaison. So thoughts on that? Memories of how you all signed up for various tasks?
I think in the past it's been, and I wish Mike were here because he has, a decade plus of like Beaverton memories. But I think in the past it's basically been a jump ball. Like we list all of the roles and it's kind of first come, first serve. And I think maybe there has been challenges in getting certain roles filled, but I think we always get there without too much hassle. I think maybe the larger issue is getting outside volunteers as well, from outside.
We need more people than you. Yeah,
exactly.
We need more people than you. Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a secret formula for that, but I think that's always more reliant on BAC members' networks. Like who do you know? Do you have a family member? Do you have friends? I brought my dad one year to help with volunteer registration, so that's always a
Great.
challenge, I think.
Yeah, okay. We did find the list of the volunteers from last time, including the outside volunteers. So we have some folks from the past that we can ask again. But yeah, outside volunteers, it's hard. It's a large event to put on, and a long course. And I think there's course marshals along the way, just as well as kind of general helping with things on site. Okay, well, I'll stop there. I think really the key things were just date is the thing we really need to kind of get things moving. So I'm not hearing anybody say like it has to be one or the other, but I can email all of you and just let you all weigh in that way. Does that sound like a plan? Okay. And then Shim and her team will join us sometime later this year or beginning of the new year. And let's just hope we actually let's hope by May we're good and we can have this event, by golly. It's been too long, so yeah.
Jean, on the topic of sponsorship, I know we always get good engagement with Nike, but maybe someone could check to see if Columbia would be interested. Because I mean, they're another local company that I'm sure would have an interest in biking, given mountain bike culture at the very least, and commuter cyclists who could use their clothes to probably go there. Question for Amy, I don't know if you know the answer. Back when I was in high school seniors had to do volunteer hours for civic engagement, and I'm just not sure if that's a thing, and if this is an opportunity in May, like right before graduation, they could use.
Yeah, I was thinking about commenting on that, and the only reason I didn't, so the answer is no, we don't have a school requirement, but for everyone, generally there's this consensus like, oh, you should get volunteer hours for college. So like for your college application or something like that, you want to be able to put down, I have X hours, I've done stuff at this organization. So I can always check with more towards when the date comes up. I could get some volunteers from our National Honor Society. I'm sure that there would be a couple interested high school volunteers. So that's definitely a resource that we have. And I would imagine that at least 5 or 10 people would be interested from our very large school. So yeah.
Councillor Hassan, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to the volunteer comment. I think that's really great. I will say in my experience teaching high school at a Title I school and a non-Title I school, making volunteering a requirement for graduation is tricky because a lot of families don't have the capacity to allow people to volunteer. But Amy kind of just took it away because some clubs and organizations that have kids that are able to have that kind of flexibility or that ability are the best ones. But just shedding some light on why volunteering is sometimes complicated for families in Beaverton.
Ananda, your hand is next.
So there is an organization on the way to Last Mountain on 30 West, the Scenic Way. There is an organization where they teach people to become carpenters and those kind of work. And that institution, all the students they need to volunteer. So I get all my volunteers from there. I forgot the name. I can look at it in my email. So they are always eager to volunteer, and there are plenty of them. Unfortunately, I'm not getting the name right now. And that institution is on the way to Last Mountain if you are biking from Lewis and Clark Park to the right. The location. I'll be able to send it to Jean later. The contact information, the name, and everything. And they would happily come and
Great, thank you.
Volunteer. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the tip.
We are slightly over time, but the next item I can cut short if there's still any more questions or discussion that needs to happen this week on Bike Beaverton. Okay, it doesn't sound like it yet, so we'll wait for that follow-up from Jean, so we can get the date figured out, and then anything else we'll keep discussing moving forward. The next item on our list is the City Council Annual Report. So Mike Mulligan has sent in his absence his brainstorming sheet with the initial ideas he had. Jean, if you don't mind pulling it up, thank you, and sharing it. We can talk about that. If anyone has additional ideas, maybe we could get those added for Mike to look over. We still have time before the final report is due. So this is just a good opportunity to see what Mike thought of and just start thinking about additional things we might want to include. Jean, would you mind slowly scrolling through it as if it were the meeting minutes so everyone can get a chance to read?
Yeah, great. Yeah. So, whoa, sorry, hold on. My notebook was sitting on my keyboard. Yeah, so he went back through all these notes, all the meeting agendas and minutes. So you can see there's a bit of things that you've given input on this last year, which is actually quite a nice list, you all. You've actually seen a lot. And then he came up with a list of these other accomplishments. The art contest, I know, is a fun favorite of all of yours. But the bike repair stations, John, and the funding we have in this current year's budget. And we'll talk about that in an upcoming meeting, John. What else? That DIY bike Beaverton routes that you all put together in about a year ago. What else? The letter you wrote for the THPRD West Side Trail Bridge. The Beaverton bike map. Some of you went to conferences and the Safe Routes to School bike rodeo. You've done a lot. And don't forget that you were named the Walk and Roll Champion of May 2021 by the Safe Routes program. And then it looks like he started to put together some goals. Here, I need to move all of you. Right, you all had done, this was right before the pandemic, wasn't it, when you had a planning session. So here's some goals. We have not talked about these actually in a little while. So that's something to note we can talk about. And then it looks like you started a list of where do we go from here. So I think this is the thing that we really haven't talked about as a group. And, you know, I appreciate that he's putting that right at the top that budgets are tight. And that's a challenge to think about and work through. The pandemic for sure needs to be highlighted. I think it's hard for anyone to not talk about the past year and not talk about the pandemic. Needing to get more cars off the road and really thinking about our climate action policy. He's talking here about fostering a culture that's promoting cycling, not just for kids, but what about commuters and employees? And that's something we can maybe talk more about the role that the West Side Transportation Alliance has in the city of Beaverton. Maybe there's some partnership there that, for all of you who don't know, that's where Caitlin works. So Caitlin, who's on our committee but isn't here this evening, she is a part of that organization. And they do a lot of really great things directly with employers and employees. And it looks like, let's see, make Bike Beaverton not only an event, but a city motto, a call to action. That's like my Why We Bike Beaverton hashtag. And then wayfinding and then moonshots. Is there anything that you all want to propose to the city council? So, and that is everything that he shared. So I'm happy to send this to all of you even after tonight so you can kind of have it to think about and review. And Nadia suggests removing some of the acronyms. Absolutely. That's easily done. So I'll stop there. And Amanda, do you want to chime in, or others?
Any other initial comments? If not, we can wait until it's sent out and you have the next month to think about it.
I was just going to suggest one comment, like as this wraps up, and I don't know what the final product will look like, but as counselors, we get a lot of stuff. And so finding ways to organize the information so that it's easily digestible for us when we read it. Like, where do we go from here? Like, is it action items? Like, are there specific action items you want us to think about? And hearing you talk about like what you want to be doing, like, are there certain things or initiatives that you want us to be really actively focusing on and thinking about that you can put in a tangible goal for us to take into consideration and just be thinking about as a council?
Well, if there isn't anything else. We still we do not have a date yet for this, but I'd say by next month we should be thinking about when when we're going to be ready to go. And in the past, it's always been the chair who's presented, but you're all sort of welcome to be there to attend and watch. City Council is currently still over Zoom. I don't know what the plan is. Who knows? Nadia is not sure herself, so we will keep you posted on that. But yeah.
Any other thoughts? I'm not seeing any hands, so that means we can move on to our next item, which is Jean's City of Beaverton updates.
Okay, let's see. So I have already sent you all the August updates for boards, commissions, and NACs, but I'll just highlight a couple here. One of the updates was regarding the Beaverton Night Market, which is happening this weekend. And in the email you received, it talked about night market happening on two consecutive days, this Friday and Saturday. And actually, because of the heat wave, we've made the really tough decision to cancel the Friday night market. The Saturday night market is still intended to go on as planned. It's from 4 to 10 p.m. And this year it's in a new location. It's at Southwest 1st and Tucker Avenue. And so street closures will be in place all day Saturday. And this is really our an event that I think people really treasure here in Beaverton. It's our family-friendly event. It has more than 40 unique vendors, as well as performers representing dozens of cultures from around the world. So we have 2 food court areas that have stages. And then this year's market is also including a collaboration with La Strada dei Pastelli. It's a chalk art festival. So you'll be able to walk around and see really beautiful works by chalk artists. So the free event is open to everyone in the community. Just be aware that, we're asking people to practice safety protocols, stay home if you're sick. And if you want to find out more information about the event, if you go to beavertonoregon.gov/nightmarket, it will take you there. And I will just quickly share on screen just so you can see the latest update. Yes, Nadia, you can, on Saturday night, you can spend double what you would have. Here we go. So here's our Beaverton Night Market page. So as you can see, here's the notice because of the heat that we've canceled Friday, but here's all the information you need to know. about getting to the market, parking, ADA access, and accommodation requests, which I think were too short, were outside that window of time for folks if they needed accommodations. So there you have that. Let's see, so that's Beaverton Night Market. So I wanted to be sure you heard that. What else? And then I also shared information with you just about how to receive updates on other City of Beaverton events. If you go to beavertonoregon.gov/notify-me, all one word, you'll get announcements about all of our other events throughout the year. And then I also shared information with all of you about being prepared for emergencies and other events, and ways to sign up for text, for getting alerts via text, web, or mobile app, as well as through Washington County and Beaverton Emergency Management. So a website that's great to know is www.oralert.gov. So look for that. Other updates I wanted to share. Sorry, I'm getting darker and darker in my room. I haven't stood up to turn the lights on. Hold on. What else did I have? Two things I wanted to let you know, kind of other items looking ahead on the calendar. So a guest that I have been speaking with is one of my colleagues at Metro, Blake McTighe, who is a planner there, and her focus is on Vision Zero, pedestrian and bicycle safety and design. But Metro recently published their 2-year progress report on the regional transportation safety strategy. And I'm going to send this link to all of you so you can take a look at it. But this was just published in June. Our region has a transportation safety strategy. Oh, and you all just disappeared.
Jean,
all
I still
hear
see
me?
you.
Yeah, we can still see.
Oh
and
my
hear you.
gosh. Okay. Well, I can't see a screen. It just went black. That is very strange. So I have no controls at all. Anyhow, September is likely that Lake will be able to join us to present this 2-year progress report with all of you. I think it's a really interesting look at a regional picture around safety, around crashes and fatalities that are happening in all 3 counties of our region. I thought it'd be really interesting for you all to hear that. And then at our October meeting, it looks like that's when the team from the Downtown Parking Action Plan will be able to join us. I sent to all of you an email with a couple of questions for you to respond. For those of you that did, thank you for doing that. But that team will be available to come and present to all of you in October. They'd love to hear your input. So those are my other updates. Yeah. What's next on the agenda, Amanda, since I can't see it?
Next up is member comments and announcements. And since Jean's screen is still being shared, I can't see all of the grid windows for looking for raised hands. So just say it out loud if you have a member comment or announcement.
I'm going to try and work on Jean's screen for a minute. So, but feel free to keep talking.
I had a comment or an input that I'd like to make to the committee and just get some feedback on it. Twice recently, riding the Fano Creek Trail, I've run into e-bikes traveling at a very high rate of speed. The one guy I yelled at, I said, slow down. And about 5 minutes later, he overtook me and parked his bike on the trail to confront me about my comment to him, and said some choice words, and that he was only going 18 miles per hour, which is way, way too fast on the Fano Creek Trail with walkers and the like. So I actually came home and looked on the Reno Creek, the Tualatin Hills site, and there's nothing about speed limits on for e-bikes. And so I really kind of think with the emergence of e-bikes, we're going to see more and more high-speed encounters like this, and somebody could get hurt. So I think it might be wise to ask THPRD to put up some signage or maybe some other things, maybe some enforcement is necessary to address the e-bike issue. So that's my comment.
John, I think that's a really important topic and in increasing years, an evergreen one. I remember talking about scooters and e-bikes when I was being interviewed for the BAC. Yeah, Jean, if we could get someone to come in and just chat with us about that. I think it's certainly a topic worthy of discussion. One of our biggest things here at the BAC is just cyclists and everyone else in the active transportation community getting along.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can reach out to Bruce Barbarash at THPRD. He's happy to come and talk with all of you. I feel like this question came up a while ago about e-bikes, so I think it would be good to share new feedback and experiences from the trail. Yeah, so I'll reach out to him and let him know about this particular concern. So we will get him on the schedule.
Councillor Hassan has posted a link to the THPRD Board of Directors in the chat window. And I also see that Michael's hand is up. Oh, I think you're muted.
Thanks. Yeah, I noticed recently, I believe John has several times in the past brought up the issue of the sort of bike repair stations around town, like the one by the library or by Beaverton Transit Center. And I noticed that the Beaverton Downtown Association has installed a brand new one in front of the swim center. And I believe they said they have plans to install another one in front of one of the newer apartment complexes downtown. So I know there's interest in that, and it's exciting to hear that groups like THPRD, Beaverton Downtown Association, are doing these things with cyclists in mind.
We still have plenty of time if there's more comments or announcements. If that's everything that everyone has to say, looks like we will be adjourning about 8 minutes early. It looks like we still have Jean on the phone. Jean, do you have anything else?
I don't. Thank you all, though. Yep,
Yeah,
I think we got everything on my list. Yeah.
Right. I have a quick comment. So many of us did bridge pedal last week. So I think Amy was there, I guess, but I couldn't meet anyone there. There were about, like, I don't know how, like 10,000 people out there. So that was very interesting. So can you do something like that in Beaverton, like a trial pedaling? We don't have any much bridges here, but we've got a lot of trails here. So we can do trail pedaling in Beaverton. We can organize it. It's just a thought. Just to bridge pedal. Yeah, that was my comment.
We do have an event. I just don't know what it is. And I know it's not as big, but I can't. Somebody knows.
Anyone? All right, sounds like something we'll need to think on. Any other comments, announcements, things you wanted to say earlier and didn't get a chance to?
And in the chat window, I have posted the URL and address of the contact for the job course. So there the kids have to volunteer. They would very happily come and volunteer. I've given all the information, the contact letters, everything. And I have used them many times in the past. Yeah.
Great.
And they're free.
Thank you, Ananda.
Sure.
All right, well, not hearing any more comments or folks speaking up, I believe that we can adjourn this month's meeting and keep an eye out for all the emails we're expecting from Jean.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks all. Take
Stay
care.
cool.